How can we use inspiration? What is the difference between using something as inspiration and using something as reference? How do we find inspiration? Do we find inspiration, or is inspiration what finds us? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, I am Veronica, aka Vespertilio. I am an Italian comic book author, tarot and oracle deck creator, and your spooky art teacher.
It's me again, yours truly.
Today I'm going to bring you along once again in the making of an illustration of mine, talking about the search for inspiration, the search for references, and how I collect them and use them in my art process. This video is divided into chapters. Part 1 is about inspiration and how to collect it. Part 2 is about how to turn inspiration into ideas. Part 3 is going to be the step-by-step art process. And part 4 is going to be your homework. I'm going to give you an exercise to just let you dive in your inspiration right away. You find the complete timeline in the description below and first pinned comment. To collect and organize our inspiration, we're going to use Milanote, who's also the sponsor of today's video. So thank you again, Milanote, for partnering with me. And with that said, let's get to the video. So I've already talked about inspiration and my relationship with it in my How to Find Inspiration video. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend checking that out, whether you do it before going on with this video or after watching this. By the way, in this first part, I'm still going to repeat some of the same concepts, just in short. So in the past months, I tried to notice what would happen within myself whenever I tried looking for inspiration. The first thing I want to say is that, in my opinion, while we can look for inspiration, we don't find inspiration. It's inspiration what finds us. When I used to try to find inspiration, I would get stuck on books or through endless scrolling for hours. And many times that resulted in me not drawing at all. What I noticed is that what happens now is that I go on the internet or I open a book and I start looking at things and noticing how they make me feel. Wait, that doesn't mean it has to be something deep. Not at all. Seeing something and going like, oh my god, it's so pretty, it's good enough. What really helps is let it come to you. And don't be fixated on a certain outcome you want. When in lack of ideas, in looking for inspiration, we should let inspiration come to us, no matter in what form it shows up. It doesn't have to be a picture. It could be something you're reading. It could be something you're listening to. It could be something you witnessed on your way home the other day. While if we already have an idea and a vision in our minds, then we should look for references. The difference is that references are specific to your ideas and to your need, while inspiration is that spark that helps us get to that idea and that vision. I'll give you an example with myself. To reduce my screen time on social media and use my phone addiction in a more constructive way, I'm making an effort to switch to Pinterest every time I find myself endless scrolling through random stuff. Some time ago, I was in my bed and I was looking at my Pinterest feed, and my eyes got caught by a shell. That shell inspired me and planted an idea in my head. I want to draw a tombstone with shells as offering instead of flowers. Then I went back to my Pinterest, and this time I specifically looked for graveyard sceneries because I needed a reference for my idea. The seashell picture was the inspiration that found me. The graveyard picture was the reference I looked for. Hope this gets you the idea. Now, one thing I got asked a couple of times on different videos, and I believe also in my previous video on inspiration, is what if you have aphantasia? For those of you who are not familiar with this term, aphantasia is a phenomenon in which people are unable to visualize imagery. While most people are able to conjure an image of a scene, object, or face in their minds, people with aphantasia cannot. I personally am someone extremely good at visualization. It has always been like this since I was very little. And sometimes I can see my ideas pictured in my head pretty clearly. So I don't know if I'm the right person to give you advice on this matter, but I'll make an effort to try. So, let's say you find inspiration. It gets you an idea, but you can't picture it in your mind. My advice would be to look for references, but then look for new inspiration in those references. For instance, let's say my idea of the tombstone with the shells wasn't a picture in my mind, but just a concept. What I would do is look for graveyards and tombstone pictures and then see which images resonate with me. That could be a particular angle from where that picture was shot, a particularly detailed tombstone, or the way light falls on that scenery in that picture. You'll notice some pictures speak to you more than others. That is also inspiration. Then again, if you need something in particular, you can look for references. I hope this helps, but if you have other questions, feel free to let me know. With that said, I now want to jump into more practical steps, so let me show you the inspiration I gathered for this illustration I want to make. So this is my Milanote welcome board. This is not my main page. For that includes some private things I'm going to talk about in a second, but basically I like it to look almost like a desktop. On my main page I have some pictures on display along with these other two birds you can see in this screenshot right here. And here I've included an example of what is on my main page, which is my editable vision board. At this point you might have noticed I'm into a lot of witchy things, and while vision boards are often associated with manifestation, motivation, productivity, I really appreciate both the creative aspect of them and the visual meditation they can support. Also, making vision boards is pretty similar to my way of collecting inspiration. In fact, it is literally a live inspiration board. Here you can see a sort of vision board / mood board for my artistic summer, which I called Hot Artist Summer. It includes pictures of my favorite women artists, visualization of the summer vibe I want to embody, some sea-themed sketchbook pages of mine, and also some personal photographs. Here you can see my cats, but we're actually going to add more pictures I collected on my phone right now. I basically uploaded them on the Milanote app on my phone, and now I can very easily drag them to my board on the desktop app and arrange them as I wish. On my main page there would be my workboard that I can't show to you, but it's actually very schematic and technical with lots of to-do lists and notes and links to Google Docs. And finally, here we have the fun part. So once we enter my atelier, I have on the left my embed sketchbook flip room that I was able to drag here by simply inserting the link. You can have access to it by joining my newsletter for free. And on the right, I have quick access to my Pinterest boards that I often use to browse for inspiration and references. Here in between, I have two projects I'm currently working on. One is my sketchbook update that I use to organize and keep track of my weekly updates for my newsletter. And as you can see, I added a note here. You can actually draw on your boards, and those are the pages I need to add to my sketchbook for this week's newsletter. Then I have a to-do list with all the things I need to do this week for these projects. And finally, let's dive in today's project. So this board is called New Illustration. Here we have a first view of what I collected for this project. As you can see here in my notes, the project is actually a gift for a friend of mine. She watches my videos, so surprise! Here I collected some of the things she likes, and as you can see, we have a lot in common. Here we also have a checklist with what I had to look up for, so vampires, witches, bats, mermaids, and we can actually check all of them now. I talked about this before, but the beauty of drawing a lot and sketching a lot also resides in the fact that you end up having a lot of artwork tailored to your needs, aesthetic and style for you to consult for inspiration and references. So that's why I always like to include previous artwork of mine in mood boards like this one. This gift is actually to say thank you for my friend's support of my art journey. So sorry time, I wanted to give her a commission in return, but she gracefully just requested a dot. Well, that is not going to stop me from making the most out of that dot. But let's proceed in order. So, as you can see here, I kind of split the board in two possibilities. One being a colored art piece with a soft pastel color palette, like this piece I made right here, and the other one for a black and white illustration. I have then created two separate boards, one about a colored mermaid core vibe and the other about a black and white spooky art. In the first one, I collected more inspiration. We have here another color palette, which is really simple to create. You just have to drag the element on your board and then use the color drop on your pictures. I also included a quick access to my Pinterest board since all of those pictures were collected there. Going back, you can see I've added a little note saying "see here for dot ideas." I thought it would have been fun to actually satisfy her request, but with a twist. So inside the spooky art board, we have some artworks by some of my favorite artists. I thought about taking inspiration from drawings by Edward Gorey inscribed in circles. There's a link to a collection of Gustave Doré's artworks. I also ended up including a link to one of my friend's favorite songs just to set the vibe. In the end, I decided to mix all the inspiration from both boards, and at this point, the idea for this artwork literally jumped in my mind. And so what I did is I quickly sketched it directly on the board. As I said, you can actually draw directly on the board. Sometimes I even write with my mouse, but I actually did this on my XP Pen drawing pad. So the idea I want to go with is a more circular abalone shell to fill the dot, and then inside the shell have a mermaid, like a sea witch reading tarot cards with a little bat hanging upside down, waking up from a nap. And so at this point, I think we can now start drawing. As you saw, Milanote is an easy to use tool to organize your ideas and creative projects into visual boards of any kind, to start laying out your thoughts and collecting information, inspiration, and references. From folders to collections to arrows to toggle lists, including the very appreciated possibility of directly drawing onto your boards, Milanote has every tool to manage your vision. And for those of you with blank page panic, no worries, because Milanote offers different templates for you to personalize for every need. If you're ready to start playing with your next creative project, you can join Milanote for free with no time limit at the link in my description. With that said, let's get to the next step of our art process and start this illustration. So let's start with our art process. I'm working on a 250 grams white smooth paper in size A4. As usual, we'll be using my Ohuhu pens to ink this piece, both from the fine liner set and the calligraphy set. If you're a regular here, you know those are my favorite pens for professional work. To start our illustration, of course, we will need pencil, eraser, and sharpener, even though I already sharpened my pencil here, and this is an HB pencil. And for the more technical steps, I'll be using a drawing compass to draw my dot and some additional guidelines, and a set square to trace the grid to build my composition. Here I also have one of my abalone shells to use as a live reference so that I can understand its form better. With that said, let's start right away with my midpoint grid. Basically, I'm marking the midpoints of my surface both vertically and horizontally and tracing across to use as a guideline for my composition. As mentioned in my video about composition, I also like to include diagonals in my grid just to have extra guidelines to plan my art piece. Jumping to the drawing compass, I'm deciding the surface of my dot, and as anticipated, I'm adding more circles to use as guidelines, both for the composition and for the structure of the shell. I'm also adding a smaller circle for the focus of my subject. And now we can start translating the sketch we did on Milanote to a proper pencil drawing. As usual, I'm taking my time. I'm starting with my background element. I actually decided to kind of hide moon phases in the holes of the abalone shell just to add an extra dash of witchy vibes. Here you see me erase pretty often. I admit I struggle to decide the pose of my sea witch, but I always find it very useful to show you how those things require time, trial and error. In fact, you can see me take a picture and flip it horizontally to check my sketch for mistakes and imbalance. I always do this whenever I can't run to my bathroom to look at the piece in my mirror, which does basically the same thing. By checking the picture, I noticed something was off and I'm erasing and redrawing what needed to be re-elaborated. I quickly sketched another idea for the tail in a thumbnail and went with it. Here you can see me take my time with smaller details and just keep going pencil on paper until I'm satisfied with my drawing. I'm taking another picture, flipping it and checking for things to fix. Even in this phase where we already moved to smaller details, this is a very smart trick. It's always a good idea to check once again how the whole composition is coming together. Once we're satisfied with our pencil drawing, we can move to inking. Of course, I'm starting with the line art of the whole piece. I'm tracing the dot perimeter first, to then move once again to my background element. I noticed I had forgotten to finish the little bat hanging upside down, so I brought back my pencil to complete it. I'm starting with the abalone shell and using both the shell on my desk and the reference pictures on my Milanote board to start building some details in the shell structure. Here I kind of made a mistake, even though it ended up being fine. Basically, until now I didn't notice I couldn't include all the moon phases in the piece, and that kind of bothered me here, but it was fine in the end. I'm proceeding with some other background details to then move first to the tail and then to the face and the rest of the figure of the mermaid. I then moved to the rest of the elements to finish off with the little bat and complete our line art. Next, I'm erasing the pencil below. Here it's sped up, but please take your time with this and don't rush. You have no idea how many times I ended up folding, bending or ripping my paper because I wasn't patient with this step. Last but not least, let's move to the final phase of the art process. Once again, I'm starting with my background element and defining the texture for my abalone shell before starting with the hatching. I'm using these lines to build the surface of my shell to make it as realistic as possible. I admit I struggled with this. The first time I did an abalone shell, I used colored pencils, and surprisingly it was way easier to me, even though I'm way more skilled with ink. But yeah, creating that effect with ink only was definitely a challenge, and I think in the end I couldn't actually achieve that, but thankfully I was able to render the shell pretty well and give it the depth I wanted. Remember to take your time with this, do not trust speed drawings. After 15 minutes spent on pencil and line art, the hatching step only took me another 51 minutes to complete. Here you can see me filling the moon phases, and at this point I still wasn't sure about this choice I made, but sometimes we have to go with bad choices. And remember that if something really bothers you, you can always fix it, or remove it, erase it, add the patch and start over. So at least art-wise, let's take advantage of that. Here I'm adding what I thought were the final touches to my shell, but later you'll see me go back to it. So now, before moving on, I decided to fill my dot with black dense hatching, and this step ended up being crucial for it set the standard for the rest of my values placement. If I had inked everything prior to this step, I think it would have probably ended up looking very flat, while this step really helped me balance black and white more harmoniously. In fact, as you can see, I used the same thicker fine liner for my mermaid's hair, and this already was bringing more balance to the whole composition. Lastly, even though it was a little off topic, I took inspiration from a koi carp for the tails pattern, and even though this is not a sea fish, I really liked the spooky look it gave to my sea witch. Here you can see me completing the various details. I used the same thicker fine liner for the little bat and to clean the outer perimeter of my abalone shell, which was looking a little lumpy to my eyes. After adding the final touches and my signature, the piece is now complete. Now let's get to your homework. I'm going to give you an exercise to start familiarizing yourself with inspiration. I give you a similar exercise in my How to Find Inspiration video, so if you'd like to try that too, I'll leave you the link in my description. This time I want you to go through your Pinterest boards or through your favorite books or wherever you want on the internet or outside of it. And every time something catches your eyes, your ears, or even just your thoughts, take a picture, save the image, write that down, and save everything in a folder of some kind, or even on your Milanote board. Once you've done that, I want you to sit with those images and let yourself play with them in your head. No idea is too silly or too complicated. Let them flow until something special will spark in your mind and you feel you really want to draw that. You really want to make art out of that. You really want to create from that. This might take some time, even days. The goal here is learning to welcome inspiration in your creative process instead of trying to find it. So take your time and really don't rush. This is just an exercise. There are no deadlines and no expectations. Once you have your irresistible idea, you can look for references, add them to your folder or to your Milanote boards, and start working on your project. Once you're done with it, I'd love to see your results. So feel free to tag me on your Instagram stories, or if you'd like to keep it more private between you and me, feel free to show me your results in my DMs. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you had fun and that I've been able to help you with your relationship with inspiration. I talk a lot about my relationship with inspiration in my videos. This is my second video on this subject, but if you have more questions about it, feel free to ask. And as usual, if you have any suggestions or requests for future videos, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you'd like to support this channel, you can simply do it by clicking the subscribe button and liking this video. My very first tarot deck, Vespertaro, is now available for purchase and you can get it at the link in my description. Also, if you like my art and content and would like to dig a little deeper, consider joining my newsletter where I share weekly updates on my digitalized sketchbook. Don't forget to check out Milanote at the link in my description where you can join for free and start collecting and playing with inspiration right away. If you stayed till this point, thank you very much. I will see you very soon with more art videos. In the meantime, let's make art. Bye.